Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. It's good to have you.
You bet, Dana. Good to be with you. I was enjoying what you had, the counsel and wisdom you gave your son on how to deal with it. The same counsel I got from my dad way back when. So that's we need a little bit more of that, frankly. We don't want kids picking any fights, but you got to defend yourself, for goodness sake.
True. You absolutely do. And it seems like, now, especially defending yourself, a lot of people, I'm getting this sense, and I see a lot of conservatives chided for speaking out and criticizing, whether it's the FBI or whether it's the DOJ. But I mean, they have every right to criticize these institutions. These institutions are supposed to be held accountable to the taxpayer. Tell us about this, because you've had 14. It didn't start at 14. More people, as I understand, from the Bureau have come forward, rank and file, to blow the whistle on leadership.
Yeah, we've had in less than a year, 14, and I anticipate more will be coming forward in light of what we just saw take place last week. But they've come forward to talk about the political nature of the Justice Department. Some of it's been on the January 6th issue. Some of it was on the school boards issue. That was our very first whistleblower. Came to us to say, when we saw what was happening and the impact it had on, if you remember the Virginia governor's race, that was the first one. We've had other ones come forward to tell us about the threat tag they're using, that when they did these over 24 investigations of parents around the country based on this whole apparatus that Merrick Garland set up at the Justice Department. We've had them come forward most recently on the pressure that's being exerted on agents to classify cases as domestic violence extremism cases, when in fact the agents tell us, no, they're just bad guys we're investigating. They're not some terrorists or domestic terrorists or white nationalism or all this stuff that the left always talks about. So it's on and on and on again, different issues, but the theme, of course, is political nature of the Justice Department, and it looks like targeting your political opponents.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so easy for Americans to believe, with everything that they saw with how the Bureau was treating parents at school boards and the tagging system that they were using, why it's really hard for them to believe these explanations coming out from the DOJ and FBI about this raid. We're talking to Congressman Jim Jordan, author of the book, Do What You Said You Would Do, Fighting for Freedom in the Swamp. So, Congressman, let me ask you this. It came out that that apparently when Trump said yesterday that 3 of his passports were seized, and then the media apparently was, I guess, leaked to the press by the DOJ, who said they were only going to respond in court filings. It was leaked to the press that that didn't happen, and then it came out with receipts that they did. Why weren't the passports listed on the inventory? Why'd they take them in the first place?
Yeah, who knows? But this idea that we're going to let our filings speak for themselves, and yet they leak all kinds of things. They leak the word nuclear. They leak this passport. They leak all. I mean, they leak an answer to the passport question, and on it goes. This just, again, I think underscores what these whistleblowers have told us. There is a political at work at the Department of Justice, and that is not supposed to be how it functions. Let me just think about this, Dana. 14 agents come to us as whistleblowers. We're in the minority. There's not, frankly, a whole lot we can do as the minority party other than begin to tell their story and explain what's going on there. But we can't subpoena the people they're talking about. We can't actually get the documents, because we've asked for all kinds of documents, and we basically get the runaround from the Justice Department when we ask for things. But it just underscores how serious this problem is, that you would have 14 agents, good agents at the Bureau, come to us and say, look, this is going on. I understand you're in the minority, but it's so egregious. We wanted to come tell you what we're seeing. That's what's got every American scared. And then you add to it what they did to the former president's personal residence, go in there and raid and take things like his passports and everything else, and then leak things about that. That's why Americans are so nervous. And it's why I think in 80-some days, you're going to see a big change happen on Election Day. And frankly, I think we're going to see it today in the state of Wyoming.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's, of course, what Congressman Jordan's referring to is the primary with Liz Cheney. That's going to be a very interesting measure, because if memory serves, she took that race initially by 40 points. I don't think that's going to happen. It could be the other way around. Talking with Congressman Jim Jordan about this whole situation with the FBI, these whistleblowers coming forward. Congressman, do you think that the FBI, are we at the point where it's so irrevocably corrupt by way of using their authority invested in them by taxpayers? Well, at least, politicians should be holding them more accountable. Should they be disbanded? Should this be something that just states regulate?
Well, I'm not sure what the change should be, but there has to be change, and there has to be. It can't just be some minor reforms, and it's got to be, I think, real and major reform and change there. I think that is just warranted when you look at the history, particularly just the history of what they've done to President Trump. But then you couple that with what the school boards issue, and frankly, just this attitude from today's left and Democrat Party. Think about what happened last week. In a 5-day time period, we had the president's home raided, we had a sitting member of Congress' phone taken by the FBI, and we had the Democrats pass legislation that unleashes 87,000 agents to go harass middle-class taxpayers, all in 5 days.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're going to have, and we're working on that. We don't want to get ahead of anything because we haven't won the majority yet. But you never want to be overconfident. I learned that a long time ago. But if in fact the voters do what I think they're going to do, we need to be ready for the type of legislation and actions that will change the way that place operates, so that your First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment due process rights are all protected as they're supposed to be under our constitutional system.
Exactly. Talking with Congressman Jim Jordan. The reason everybody, I think, is talking so much about those passports is because there was no reason for the FBI to take them. There was no specificity, at least that we know of. I mean, they had like little things like note from Roger Stone listed in the inventory, but they couldn't list this. They act like it was a mistake. Apparently the FBI said it was mistakenly done. That's a huge, that's too big of a mistake to ignore, considering everything else that has happened. How would you approach? I mean, I don't even know, even if we do get a majority in the House and we're able to take the Senate, I mean, I think it's going to be close. How could the FBI be held accountable? I mean, short of just disbanding the agency at large.
Well, we're going to have you have the hearings, and we can, if we're in the majority, we can have Mr. Wray and Mr. Garland in front of the Judiciary Committee on a much more regular basis to ask them the kind of questions that need to be asked, so the American people can get answers from someone sitting under oath. So you have that element that you don't have when you're in the minority. You have the appropriations process. Remember, the way the founders set up our system, they actually envisioned in these three separate and equal branches of government, they actually envisioned if any branch would have the most authority, it would be the legislative branch, because that's the branch that controls taxing and spending. Mm-hmm. So you can use that spending power, that appropriations power to affect change. Now, it's tough because will Joe Biden sign something like that? Probably not. So you're going to be in a big debate. But that's the kind of national debate we need to have in light of the history that we've seen, the recent history we've seen from some of these people at the top of the FBI. So all that is how I think you begin to affect the change that needs to happen. And you lay out the proposals and you pass them in the House. And if they can't get through the Senate because you need 60 votes and they don't get signed by Joe Biden because he's against them, you're beginning to frame up the 2024 race when I think President Trump is going to run against Biden or whoever the Democrats put up. And I think President Trump's going to win.
Yeah, we're talking with Congressman Jim Jordan about the FBI whistleblowers, this raid. You know, it causes a lot of people to, think if this can happen to a former president of the United States, we just know that because he has the platform and the ability to publicize it. It makes you wonder how many more, different stories of egregious abuse by this agency have been carried out. That's the thing. And I'm sure these whistleblowers are kind of indicating such.
Yeah, and here's the other thing to keep in mind: the left's not going to stop. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think what's happening here is the same thing that happened in 2019. 2019, if you remember, Bob Mueller comes and testifies in front of the Judiciary Committee. I think the date was July 24th. It's a complete flop. Bob Mueller doesn't know what he's talking about, and the country fully realizes at that point, oh, this whole Russia thing that Schiff and everyone was talking about was truly a hoax. The Democrats didn't wait 24 hours because the very next day they jumped on the phone call that President Trump had with Zelensky, and they said, we're going to impeach President Trump over a phone call he has with a foreign head of state. They didn't miss a beat. Same thing is happening now. I think the Democrats realize this January 6th committee is falling flat. They realize that today the people in Wyoming are probably going to send a message, and they said, well, we got to move on to the next thing. Let's go raid the president's home over some Archives Presidential Records Act, for goodness sake, where we think he's keeping nuclear information. Yeah. Well, if it was that darn important, you had 18 months to get it, for goodness sake. Yeah. So, but this is how the left operates. They never stop. They're continually on the offense coming after us. And the only response that we can take is we have to be on the offense, and we have to do it in a way that's consistent with the Constitution, but we have to be on the offense and fight them back. And that's what President Trump does and what President Trump did, and that's why they're so out to get him.
Yeah, and the Presidential Records Act, as I understand it, that doesn't even have a criminal statute. That's just, them trying to toss something out there. It's so ridiculous.
It is so ridiculous, and the good people of this great country have common sense, and they understand it.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point. Congressman Jim Jordan's on the phone with us right now. If you had tweeted on the 15th, if President Trump was such a threat to national security, why wait 18 months to retrieve the quote unquote sensitive documents at his home? Because it started as being, well, it's a National Archives, thing, dispute, which every president, that I know of has had some kind of dispute with the pencil pushers at the National Archives. Yeah. And then it became, well, it was because he may have had nuclear material. So you're telling me you lost nuclear material and it was somewhere in Melania Trump's closet? I mean, that's what we're to understand? It keeps changing. Do you think Garland's been consistent, and should he be impeached?
Well, look, he said we're not gonna we don't comment on ongoing investigations. But I think what happened is
they leak.
He saw where the country was. Yeah, and they leak, of course. But he actually went out and did his 3-minute and 40-second whatever it was a press statement, because he realized the country saw through this, saw it for what it was, and as far as the impeachment goes, that'll be a question for the entire conference. We will decide that if, in fact, the American people put us in the majority.
So
we will decide
let
that
me ask you that. Like, with the time
there.
left, we're talking with Congressman Jim Jordan. We just got a couple of minutes left. So if Republicans do take the House, can you make a promise to voters that it would be a priority to either impeach somebody or all of the above? Because I think the priorities of voters are get Garland out of his position. This guy's corrupt. He's not fit for the job. We dodged a reckoning or something with him not being on the Supreme Court. I'm so glad that he's not. And would we hold the FBI accountable? And can we repeal, for the love of all things holy, can we repeal this kill the economy, quote unquote, inflation tax that Biden's putting forward? Yeah. Is that something that Republicans can do?
And the 87,000 bureaucrats who are going to go harass people who go to work every day. I gave a speech on the House floor last week, and I said, you know how this is going to work. They're going to harass middle-class taxpayers. And the example that just jumped in my mind was it's the assistant football coach at the local high school who helps students and student athletes, who's got the side business. He mows grass in the summer, he paints houses, and he pays his taxes. But some bureaucrat working remote, sipping their fancy coffee is like, I'm going to go after this guy's side business. That's what I'm going to do. And they're going to harass this guy who was a great person in so many small town communities, who's helping people.
Right.
That is what ticks me off. So yeah, that is definitely something.
So we can impeach Garland.
And then
we can impeach Merrick Garland.
When it comes to Mayorkas, when it comes to Garland, when it comes to the President of the United States, I say all along, I think these guys have not followed the law. I think there's huge problems there, but that is a decision that I think you have to make as a conference. As the Republicans, who will be in the majority in the House, we will make as a conference, and then ultimately we'll go from there. But I do think that you look at Mayorkas, certainly he deserves it. Now, whether we do it is, again, going to be a decision by the conference.
We're talking with Congressman Jim Jordan, author of Do What You Said You Would Do, Fighting for Freedom in the Swamp. We got 30 seconds. Last quick question. Are you going to run for House leadership, Congressman?
No, look, the Judiciary Committee.
I ask you this every time you're on.
Been the committee that defends your constitutional liberties, that the Democrats, your First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, all the things they've been attacking. So if Lord willing, if we win and I get the privilege, I want to be chair of the Judiciary Committee and do the investigations that need to be done, get to the truth, and defend your rights. Amen to that. Congressman Jim Jordan, thank you so much for what you do, sir. We appreciate your time with us today. The book, Do What You Said You Would Do, Fighting for Freedom in the Swamp. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you.